I'm David Eisnagel. This is No Chaser. The topic I want to discuss today regards the sentiment in recovery that you can't get and stay sober for anyone except yourself. And I think it's important to explore this notion because this is not only something that concerns alcoholics and addicts and people in recovery, but it also deals with the perceptions of alcoholics and addicts that, people have, not just the general population, but more importantly, the people in the lives of alcoholics and addicts. So if you are someone who has someone in your life that is suffering from addiction and you yourself aren't an alcoholic and addict, you may have a lot of questions and a lot of upset questions too. Like, why can't they quit when they're going to lose their kids or they're going to lose their family? Like, I get it, you're an alcoholic, you're an addict, like drinking and using is what you do, and you like it's really, really a strong urge, but like, really, you can't quit for your family? I mean, you can totally imagine like the classic scenario, the confrontation in the kitchen between the spouses, and the one goes to the alcoholic and says, you're drunk again, and you promised you'd stop, you promised to me, to our kids, and yet you keep drinking. I mean, do you say you love us so much, but you won't stop drinking, even though you're going to lose us if you do? I mean, you're choosing booze over me, over our kids. Our kids, the children. Think of the children. I don't mean to be so jokey about such a dark subject, but, I mean, come on. You gotta laugh sometime. But the main point is that, yes, it looks pretty morally terrible from an outsider's point of view. Like, why? I mean, a lot of it doesn't make sense because it doesn't make sense. Because if you try to put yourself in the mind of an alcoholic and you aren't one, you're just not using the same software that runs in the brain of an alcoholic or an addict. And the one thing is it's not like as an alcoholic when I chose drugs and alcohol over things I cared about so much in my life. It's not like I was like, yeah, I care about this thing so much, but I'm just going to drink anyway. This totally makes sense to me. If you had my mind, it would make sense to you. Like, I'm not saying that. It didn't make sense for almost all the reasons I drank. It didn't make any logical or rational sense. It was just, it was a compulsion. It was something where I could convince myself to do it when I didn't really want to do it, using insane mental gymnastics. I mean, it was something where I would just be overtaken by the urge to do it. And I'll say one thing: if you're in the middle of it, if you're still drinking and you're trying to quit, that's one thing. But if you've gotten sober and you're trying to stay sober, it makes it seem a little bit worse if you choose to drink again once you've had some clarity of mind. This is something I've done a ton of times, and people around me would just be like, your life was getting better and you went out and you drank again. And there was so many times where I was quitting and trying to remain sober for everything besides myself. And again, the thing that, now I'll say this, there's people I've known, and I know there's just plenty of people out there who legitimately quit drinking and using for their marriage and for their family and for their kids, and they would attest to that. Like, no, I didn't do it for myself, I did it for them. And I'm not one to say what's in the hearts and minds of other people. I mean, I don't doubt any of that. What I'm saying here is that not being able to stay sober for others, that you have to do it for yourself, is more of a general consensus between rehabilitation centers, 12-step programs, drug and alcohol counselors. It's a general rule that proves to be true, I would say, most of the time. Not that you can't do it. And again, this is not to say that these things aren't good motivations. I mean, take all the motivation and the will from something that you can. It's like when it comes to trying to stay sober, it's like packing for a survival trip in the wilderness. Just bring everything you can. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. I mean, use everything at your disposal to not pick up that drink or to not use that drug. But what I'm talking more about is that if your sole focus for why you are going to stay sober is someone else, regardless of how important they are to your life, it probably won't work. Because staying sober is kind of like it's an inside job. It's not something that can be dictated by the significance of other things around you. And the thing you come across a lot, and where there may be judgment towards alcoholics and addicts, is just like, why, let me give you an example. There are plenty of parents out there who are alcoholics and addicts who would totally willingly give their life to save the life of their children. To save their children, they would give up their life. Yet they could not put down drugs and alcohol for them. How does that make any sense? Like, how can they care about them more than themselves, but yet they can't stay sober for them? How does that even work? Shouldn't there be at least some sort of hierarchy of like priorities that like supersedes, drinking and using again? And the whole problem with all this is that, again, this is coming at it with a mindset that normal people have. And this isn't quite the way that that decision making goes for alcoholics and addicts. And one thing too, a reason I want to touch on of why it's something that has to be, why you have to be sober and stay sober for yourself, is because the things that you have to do, the changes that you have to make, the effort you have to put forth, it's not something that is necessarily connected to the other things in your life that you're trying to stay sober for. Like, you can think of it as, I am not going to pick up this drink because I love my children so much. Right? That totally makes sense. But do you think of it in the same way as, well, I need to go to a meeting, or I need to start therapy, or I need to, do whatever you need to do. I gotta do this because of the love for my children. Usually you don't think of it in that way. It's normally just this, it's thought of as like this binary choice, this zero-sum game. I'm going to drink and lose them, or I'm going to not drink because I love them. And it doesn't work that way. The thing is that getting to that moment of choosing to do the next drug or to take that next drink that will ruin everything, usually when you've gotten up to that moment, a lot of stuff has happened before that. And all that stuff that has occurred before that can't be stopped by just how much you love someone or how important something is to you. The things that have to stop that are the changes in the habits that you enforce upon yourself to break away the things like obsession or compulsion or how to deal with stress. All those things they aren't motivated by your love for something else or the importance of something else. They're motivated by the importance you place upon yourself. I mean, you have to find value in yourself, which is usually pretty low for somebody that's an alcoholic or an addict and are trying to get sober. Like, from the beginning, there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes to it. But you have to get to a point where you're just like, my life is worth something. I can't do this anymore. And I want to be sober. I love my family. I love my children. But I have to do this because I can't do this anymore. And I actually care about my life in this sense. And the thing is that you not only think that you need to do better, you think that you deserve better. Like, that is a key aspect. And that type of mentality is what really helps generate recovery. Because if you care about yourself and you care about your well-being and the things that you want, which a lot of this may come across as selfish, and in a way it is, but think of it as like a positive type of selfishness. These things, the regard for yourself, the feeling that you deserve better, that you need it and you should have a good life. That is what's going to push you to do the things that you really don't, or are scared to do, or are unwilling, or are unsure. It's going to push you to do those things. The simple love and the value of these other things in your life, they don't really reinforce that inner stuff. And I'll try to illustrate this with a scenario that I came across, and I've thought about a lot. I remember at a meeting, there was a guy there who was really struggling. He hadn't even had like 24 hours of sober time, but he was at a meeting because he was like, my wife's going to kick me out. I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose my kids and everything. And after the meeting, I remember this one other fellow came up to him, and he was roughly like demographically the same. They were both like dudes in their 40s to 50s, and he was, talking as like an equal. He's like, hey man, you love your kids? And he's like, yeah, with all my heart. And he's like, do you have a picture of them? And he's like, yeah. And he pulls out his wallet, and he's like, yeah, that's them right there. And the guy tells him, all right, now, the next time you want to have a drink, pull out that picture and look at those kids. Now, I don't want to come across as cynical or heartless, or, to put it bluntly, an asshole. And I'm not saying that is bad advice. It's very good motivation. I'm not saying anything is wrong with that sentiment. But I do want to make the point that as a route to recovery, the idea of that is usually not feasible. Because here's the thing. When you really don't feel like going to a meeting or going to a therapy session or keeping up with some of the wellness habits you have, whether it's exercising or meditation, whether it's doing the things you need to do in your life to get better, when it's hard to do those things, do you pull out the wallet then and look at the picture of the kids? No. Again, it comes back to this idea that these decisions that we make to go back to drinking or to using are made in a singular fashion. But it doesn't. There's a lot of little things that happen before that where you ignore some of the things that you're feeling, or you don't address what's going on in your life, or you're pushing down stress, or you're not communicating. I mean, a lot of those things you don't consider, like, I need to do this because of the love I have for this person, or I need to do this to save my family. I have to participate more in therapy because of love for my family. No. It's usually just thought of like, I can't drink, I can't use because I will lose my family. And that zero-sum game mentality, it doesn't work in the process of staying sober. The other thing is that the idea of committing yourself to staying sober for the important things in your life, not even just your family. Let's say it's for your career, it's for like your health, or it's for your freedom. Like maybe you are on some probation, or you're going to go to jail, or like you're facing prison time, the next DUI you get, like whatever. Like those things that you hold as important, they can have obviously all the significance in the world, and they can come with all the motivation you would think even a messed up person could acknowledge, that you can't lose these things. That usually isn't in the equation of the things we do and what goes on in our mind before we choose to drink again. And the idea that you hold these things with value in your mind at the same level all the time is also a misconception. And what I mean by that is that you can get into modes where, like plenty of times where I was like, I don't want to lose my relationship with the woman I love, and I don't want my family to disown me. I know these things, but eventually I got to a point where I was just like, screw it, man. I don't care. Like, you know what? Maybe they'll just be better off without me. And then immediately once I started drinking, I'm just like, no, I screwed up so much. Why did I even think that? Again, your moods and your ideals about things can totally fluctuate. And, think of it when it comes to what can get you to go back out and to start drinking and using again. It is not a one-time thing that puts you over the edge. I mean it can be, but I'm saying that it doesn't always follow that suit. You know, like think of it like the Grand Canyon that had, what was it, the Snake River, that's what created it, just over like millions and millions of years. You know, think of you're having a severe craving to go to the gas station and get that bottle. You know, think of that as a wave, and it's a big wave. It's a tsunami. But then you think back to, you know, I love my family so much. I want to keep my kids. I want to be the father they deserve. I want to do all that stuff. And you think about all that motivation and the importance of that as a mountain, right? And that wave can come and smack against it, but it's not doing anything to that mountain. That mountain's going to stay there. With that kind of mindset, you'd be like, yeah, I can stay sober for them. But the mind and the struggles of getting sober and staying sober doesn't work like that. Like it's not tsunamis or it's not waves. It's more like that Snake River. It can erode you just over time and stress, to where you do something you thought you'd never do, or something so foolish or crazy or reckless or selfish. And it's not just because you made a decision at this one point to do it. Usually you've been weakened and made vulnerable by you know, either stresses that are caused externally, or like mental health issues, or things that you may not be addressing that are happening, and you think you're fine. You know, I'm all good. I'm doing this for my family. I'm doing this for my freedom. I'm doing this to keep my life. And it will slowly, you know, put you into a spot where you say screw it, or you talk yourself into something crazy. You're like, you know what, one drink will be fine, or if I just take like one hit, I'll get high. I'll get high tonight, or you know, maybe my using and drinking, it wasn't that bad. Like, you can just, if these things that happen, you know, go unchecked, if the obsession just kind of festers in your mind, or you don't find a way to positively relieve stress you have, or resentment that you have build up stays there. Again, it's not just one giant wave that will make the Grand Canyon. It will be that river and that erosion. And that is the problem with trying to use something outside yourself as the complete and sole motivation to stay sober. It has to be truly something you want to do for yourself. Because if you want to do it for yourself, that will get you to do things that will start to dam up that river. It will get you to take actions that are only motivated by the self-betterment that you want for yourself. I mean, it's a lot of this, it can sound strange because it can be like, well, why can't that motivation for the things you love and the things you care about so much, why can't that make you do those things? Why can't that push you to make the changes that you need to do? And I mean, like I was saying before, in some scenarios it can, and it can work. But the thing is that if you're trying to stay sober and you're early in it, it's not that every second of the day the things like an obsession or compulsion or the urges, the cravings, or the doubt, the hopelessness, it's not like that happens every second 24/7. However, the possibility of it is open 24/7, like one of those gas stations I used to buy vodka at. Like, it is something that is always, it's something you have to constantly be on alert for, and it's something that you have to work on as your own. And I mean that in the sense that these things that are so important in your life, they're not on your mind. They're not a part of your thinking 24/7 like the way that the addictive thinking can be. And so you can't quite use that stuff to push you and to push those thoughts away. You have to practice behaviors, or you have to work on doing things to get you to that point where you're willing to do something like that. That was specifically really hard for me, was to reach out to someone else. It was always so difficult, and there would be just nights where I was really struggling, and I would just be like, you know what, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. You know, and it's in those moments where I didn't consider that, you know, David, if you don't make this call, you're gonna lose everything. I wouldn't think of it that way. And in the way that I was able to get better, I didn't base my decisions that way either. I didn't, you know, the things that I needed to do to help myself, I didn't think of it as you're going to lose everything you care about, the things you love, they're going to be gone if you don't do this. I made decisions that were able to give me sobriety. I made those decisions because I started to want to do those things for myself. It wasn't just about like losing things, you know, it wasn't about the negative consequences, it was about positive things I wanted in my life. And it was about, again, going back to not only thinking that I needed change and I needed to be better, but it really pushed me over the edge when I believed that I deserve change. I deserve something better. There's so much self-loathing that goes on in alcoholism and addiction, and you know it's hard. It seems almost natural to try to find motivation outside yourself because you feel like such crap that you're like, I don't even, you know, I don't care. You know, it kind of goes along with that idea of like, I'm not hurting anybody else, I'm just hurting myself by doing this. You know, that's kind of where your headspace is at, where you're like, I care about them, but I don't care about me, or, you know, screw it, I just don't care enough about me. You know, and this is something that unfortunately can't just be conjured up out of nowhere, but if you can find that, if you can find the desire to want something better for yourself and to want to stay sober for yourself, that's where you have a real chance at recovery. And again, I can't stress this enough. It is not to say that, you know, the pledge to do something to save your marriage, or to, you know, get your kids back, or to get the respect of your family, or to not be kicked out of the house or be disowned or whatever. It's not to say that none of that stuff is useful. It clearly is very powerful. What I'm saying is that stuff, all the other important things in your life, those alone can't be the sole motivation. Recovery is think of it as like an inside job. It's got to be done from within, and it's got to be done from motivation from within, because you actually care to want something better. That you don't just want to do it for the things in your life and the people in your life that are important. You do it because you think you're important. So that's my spiel. Think of the children.